Howdy. Welcome to my cellar for the 141st time. Got a number of different things to talk about tonight, so we'll see where it leads us. First one, my character wears a mask. It's actually pretty fun to have it as an accessory. Naturally, that got me to thinking about magical masks. As a player, I haven't come across any yet. I wonder, what types of magical masks might there be out there? Well, I'll tell you about a jade mask. But first, let's talk about masks. When the coronavirus first started and everybody was wearing masks, I thought, it must be a nightmare to be a small business person. Everybody coming in's got a mask on. You can't identify anybody if they're there to stick you up. What do we associate masks with? Masquerades, where we go and we become someone we're not and follow the behavior that the mask would suggest. When we're trying to hide our identity. So, how your world works with masks, I don't know. Masks are often associated with cults. Not a good thing when people go around and the top of their head looks like a bird and they're following some guy named the Sparrow or, you know, something like that. I know I'm mangling it on purpose. Masks have that connotation. Now, if your world has a culture where masks are accepted, where everybody wears a mask, something like that, I can see that. That'd be great. However, in a culture where masks are not commonplace, they would raise, in my opinion, it would seem like, certainly in my world, that would raise questions and suspicion and paranoia, perhaps. Why is this person not showing his face? What's he here to do? What horrible things has he done already? Magical masks. I have an adventure all laid out in my head that someday I might get to write. It's historically based on the collapse of the Mayan Empire, and I would be doing the adventures would be time traveling basically and get there equipped to look like anyway. They would be equipped to blend in, and I was going to get pieces of a turquoise mask because when the mask is put back together while the pieces are assembled, it has some powers. Now, depending upon how it was put back together, it could either be malevolent or it could be good. And I imagine you could do things like that. It would be interesting to have a cursed mask that you tried it on and now you couldn't take it off. And eventually it takes over your brain because it's psionic and controls you. So a lot of things you could do with masks. Most of them unpleasant, in my opinion. Okay. Salute, Tim. Congrats on reaching number 140. P.S. I'm sending you 10 hit points healing for your shoulder. Thank you. No cast tonight. I can prop my arm on the mouse panel here. I don't know what they call these things that you pull out on the side. I guess where people used to write. Anyway, that's where my mouse pad is. I can do that for a little while before it starts getting all twitchy. What were you lecturing the class on at Bradley and Peoria, and how did it go? Okay, it was game design theory. It was a design theory class taught by a professor named Tim Hutchings, who right now is actually on the West Coast. It's all remote. It was all Zoom. So I have no idea where. Some of the people were obviously at home because they had custom backgrounds that looked really spiffy, you know, like they were on the moon or some planet or whatever. I thought it went real well. I enjoyed it. I think they did. We talked about a successful game design and having a hook, something that would set theirs above the rest. We talked about the social impact of role playing. It went, I thought, quite well. Now, if we can just get the paperwork figured out, they've offered to pay me for it, so I'm all for that. Okay, let's see. RE Healthcare, arthroscopy is a cool word. That keyhole surgery is amazing stuff. Yeah, I know. I've had it in my abdomen a couple of times. 3 times, to be exact. Kind of off topic for this channel, but yeah. How do health plans work for retirees? Well, I'm not advising you. I can tell you how ours work. My wife and I are both retired. Out of your Social Security, so much is taken out each month, and you're then on Medicare. And you have co-pays that I find pretty reasonable. But most 80% of everything is pretty much taken care of. So my surgery in that 80% or perhaps a little more is covered by the insurance. They take it out every month just like you would have yours taken out of your paycheck. And that's the way it works. It's you never see the money, so it doesn't hurt, except when you see what it was before they took it out. Okay, let's see. Okay, and yeah, I can't complain at all. My wife and I are in a program called Tri Health. It's an aggregation, a conglomeration of hospitals, including the ones that my wife worked at for 30 years. And we just figured out today she's been retired for 7. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to gaming. Welcome back. Thanks for a great show. I guess these are shows. I don't know. I just like to think about them as chats. TSR provided me with something to do in my adolescence other than dangerous drugs, booze, and making unplanned children. I noticed the modifier dangerous. Well done. Yeah, the unplanned children. No, we don't need that. Thank you for your influence and hard work in the process of creating these wonderful games. Always be a fan. Sorry for the question. If you ever covered this before, do you have any? It took a while to get to it, didn't it? Any advice on creating a hex-crawl map? Specifically, how would you use dice for terrain? Well, I don't know. Let's think about this a minute. First off, if you're going to do a hex crawl, I'm assuming you're going outdoors and through a jungle or some menacing terrain or whatever. So then the question would be, what's the scale of your hex? Is it 1 mile to the hex, 5 miles to the hex, 10 miles to the hex? When I'm writing stuff to adventure outdoors, I try to use terrain appropriate adversaries, monsters. I wouldn't have snow leopards attacking them in the desert, but I'd certainly have prides of lions hunting them down in the desert. Dice. The only thing I would think of is if I had prepared an outdoor adventure and I had the terrains determined in advance, because you obviously can't determine what kind of terrain. You don't just step over a line and, oh, it's polar now. The only dice I would see is, okay, which of the denizens of this type of terrain did you just run into? I've never considered the dynamics of a hex crawl outdoors. I always just had distances that had to be covered through terrain that was predetermined and weather that may or may not be variable. So that's the best I can answer that. Sorry if that's not enough. All right, next page. Okay, we're going to talk about the wheel of blame. The wheel of blame is a name I gave it tongue-in-cheek. Here's what the wheel of blame is, and I'm going to be running some online that you can go sign up for and play. I'll tell you when in a minute. Okay, the wheel of blame. People sign up for it. They show up. I give them a pre-generated character somewhere between 3rd and 5th level, and they have commensurate equipage based on their level. Nothing great, nothing nothing tremendous, except for the potions that I give them. So that's all blind, and there's a reason that they're low levels, because low levels have to think about how to overcome something rather than just charge in and absorb the hits and kill it. That's why I choose to go with low levels. Each player, when it's face-to-face, when it's over the cameras, we do it differently, obviously, but when it was face-to-face, each player would put 2 things on an index card, anonymously. 2 things. And I would then take those cards, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, however many they were. I'd go through them. I'd put my brain into overdrive, and I would then connect these things together and start an adventure based on them. Now, the concept is that you're on a large wheel, vast cosmic wheel. It's a test of your metal, etc., etc. That part's not really important, except that you're on a wheel. You're always going forward. It's the ultimate railroad. You can't get off the sides. You're there to be tested. If you make it, you will be certified as a qualified adventurer. You'll be, you'll go up. It's the backstory is just there to fill stuff in. We're there to have fun. And I'll give you examples of some of the fun we've had. One of the very first games I ran of this, someone put down Red Dragon and Dill Pickle. Those are their 2 things. So up in the distance, they saw this enormous banana-looking thing spiked onto the top of an impossibly tall granite spike. And of course, when they got close and they saw this thing flying around it that looked suspiciously like a dragon. And so as they got closer, the banana-looking thing turned out to be green, and the flying thing really only had a wingspan of about 9 feet. And it's part of the briefing at the beginning that at every encounter, there will be a token of some sort. Used to be, I used a lot of different things early. Now I have coins that I had cast up by Iron Wind. And each player has to acquire a token. And if I've answered the question before, if somebody dies, can I have their token? Nope. Once it's their token, it's key to them and will only work for them. And the end of the story is when they've made it through all the tests and the obstacles and the fights and what have you, there's a little obelisk pops up out of the ground with a slot that just happens to be the size of the token that says it's not my fault. And when they've proven that it's not their fault and put that in the slot, they're transported from the wheel of blame back to where they started, and yay, clap on the back and a big party and all that. And it's about having fun and thinking outside the box. Go back to the pickle and the dragon. As it happened, I had a lady playing in this game, and she was trying to see how far, how grown up would I be, and I had no problem with this. I enjoyed it, and so they dispatched the little red dragon that was behaving like a dragon, just as a young foolish one, and they couldn't find a token. I don't even remember what I was using back then. They couldn't find it. And so the lady looked at me real sultry, like, says, I'm going to go up and I'm going to lick that pickle. The table cracked up. I cracked up. I said, yeah, okay. And I rolled a percentile and I got an 83. And I said, man, oh man, what a pickle. All your hit points just got healed. You feel great. So somebody else jumps up. Oh, I'm going to go up and lick the pickle. And so I rolled the die and I got a much lower number. And I said, well, you feel pretty good. Half your hit points just got healed. And somebody else ran up and they were going to lick the pickle. And I said, well, the pickle seemed to have lost its potency. You'll probably need to come back in a couple of hours. Well, that cracked the table up entirely, which cracked up the entire room, disrupted the entire room that we were sitting in the middle of. The same lady had put down undead vixens and a portal to another dimension. So when they stepped through the mirror, they were attacked by 47 undead female foxes who all had rabies. And so I take what they give me and I twist it around, and then they got to figure out how to how to get through this thing. My greatest pleasure is that at the end, when we have to, this is the other part of the blame, when I read the cards and they have to fess up to whose it was, and they realize how I've disguised it, mutated it, they go, oh man, you mean I died on my own card? That's music to my ears. Now, nobody stays dead. Because if there's 8 adventures, they have 4 universal antidotes. Universal antidotes put heads back on, arms back on, body halves together, whatever. It's a convention thing I came up with a few years ago. So, okay, you screwed up early here. Drink on the universal antidote and keep playing. You paid your money. Let's keep playing. We're here to have fun. We're not here to play in a campaign. So I've only once, in all the times I've been running this, only once not had an entire party come back. That party of 8 actually needed 5. And the one who didn't come back used up 3 or 4 of them. And at the end of the game said he'd have been happy. He wouldn't have felt cheated after the first time he died. So it's about laughs. It's about D&D. Don't get me wrong. There is a there's not a magic user, but there is a cleric, and the way I handle clerics and their prayers is very loose and very flexible, so they don't commit it before the game starts. They have access to all the prayers that their level allows them to pray. They can only say so many during the adventure. They get lots of healings, cure light wounds, cure serious wounds, because it's not about killing them, it's about surviving. One party early on, in fact, it was the one where they didn't all come back. They were faced with an seemingly impenetrable thorn hedge. So one of the players stripped naked. They covered him with this honey that they discovered and carried along with them. And the giant butterflies affixed themselves to him and flew him over the head. And it's all about the players thinking outside the box. It's a challenge for me to take the 2 ingredients I'm given and spin it into an encounter. And it's a series of encounters. But it's very much role-playing. You're limited to what the character that you have could do. You're limited to those strengths and weaknesses and whatever. But that is what the Wheel of Blame is. It's role playing, but it's not having a character that you've got half your life invested in. Okay, let's see now. Well, we'll go for the rest of these questions. Okay, you said you design your wheel as a series of tests. I infer the tests are thematically unrelated. Right, because as each thing, as they complete each test, they get the little woo, woo, woo feeling, and all of a sudden they're on the other side. There's an impenetrable waterfall of zzz, 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 can't put my hand through behind them, and they must always go forward. And so they don't have to, they can just come out of a polar region, whoop, and now they're in the savannah. All depends on what's coming. So yeah, there's a lot of mental agility required. All right, let's see. Doesn't need to make sense, right? Right. It's not about the PCs. It's about the players having a good time. It's not about the characters. It's about the players. That's what this is fun. That's what this is for, to have fun. And that's the way I run them. We're there to have a good time. What part does the role playing take? Well, you got to think. You got to play the character you're given. If it's a 4th level fighter, you got to play like a 4th level fighter, meaning you don't have an unlimited stack of hit points. You don't deal unlimited amounts of damage. So you got to think. You got to remember back how it was when you were a 4th level player. And you got to rely on cap. And I purposely do not give obstacles that cannot be overcome. That would be stupid. Nobody'd have any fun. I wouldn't have any fun. The players wouldn't have any fun. I just wouldn't do that. I try very hard to give a challenge commensurate to the abilities of the group, and we have a good time and we laugh a lot. The flavor is fun. No, these players aren't in D&D hell and made to do this again and again and again. They're pleased to do it. Blame is mostly, why is it called the Wheel of Blame? Mostly because at the end of the game, everybody's sitting there, and I read the cards off one at a time, and everybody has to fess up on whose it was, so that everybody that had something bad happen to them in that encounter gets to blame them. Blame because the coin says it's not my fault. It's a tongue-in-cheek application here. Is it a big component of the game? No. Now, these can be found on the NorthTexasRPG.com. Go to there. They have Discord sites. They have ongoing games going. So that's where you need to go. I'm running one on Saturday, October 24th. It's at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. It'll be for up to 8 players. I've done this before we'll probably be using my server on Discord. We will be using cameras. You have to have a camera, because we have to show each other stuff at the very beginning. Because everybody can hear everything else that you say. I'm going to do this again on November the 14th, also a Saturday, this time at 6 o'clock Central Time. That's for Long Con. The one in October is for North Texas. But they're all through their servers and that. And if you go to the North Texas server, just look for OD&D. And that'll click in all this stuff. Okay. Question about Swords and Spells. I see that Gary is listed as the author and you're listed as the editor. But along with these, Dave Arneson and Rob Kuntz are listed as development. Do you know what the development contributions of Arneson and Kuntz were to swords and spells? Also, do you know generally what the development, playtesting, and editing process was like? Very interested in the backstory about how these rules came about. Okay, excuse me, I gotta sit up and I can't do it but with the one arm. Pardon me. Oh, yep, you notice I'm wearing silver brulee shirt. Swords and Spells was Gary's next generation chainmail. And it was the culmination of the original D&D from individuals refine to the gods to now here's the mass battles that were the projected outcome. You retired, you built your own, and the campaign continued. Now you're lords leading your troops and your mercenaries and whatever into mass battles. Gary worked on this a long time. Just like Gary worked on classic warfare a long time, over several years. I'm sure that this he had been working on probably once chainmail was out. Development in the sense of Arneson and Kuntz, in this case, and Rob and Dave. Development is pounding out the rough spots, finding holes. It's not just editing, finding, missing words and poorly written instructions. Development is pounding it into shape, literally, knocking off the rough edges, refining this, refining that. I imagine that Dave Arneson got credit because I imagine Gary had seen what Arneson's mass or large scale or campaign battles, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure he was familiar with how Dave did his. After all, they were an outgrowth of the Bronstein campaign. So it would only be fair to recognize that. I'm sure Rob ran games of it for Gary, for whoever he could get to play test it at Gen Cons, whatever, and also did the same thing. Cons are a great place to play test games, especially if the players know they're going into a play test. They'll try to get away with more stuff that way, and you can find out where the loopholes are in your rules. So I imagine that's how it worked. You can do a lot of game design, particularly with miniatures, particularly in this type of miniatures. You can do a lot of game design mathematically without ever having. A lot of design is based on mathematics, and the outcome of any given battle will be how well the dice conform to the norm. That's pretty much that was a lot of how those rules were put together. We'd already put out Classic Warfare, and it was for smaller armies from history. This had the potential of being much larger. Classic Warfare had some rough spots, to say the least, and I take part of the blame for that, though I didn't get to test it much. I'm pretty sure, based on what I remember going on at that period of time and when I was handed it to me, that Rob had probably run a few on Gary's back porch, so to speak, wherever he might have run them, and made some additions, because as I recall, the manuscripts I got had a lot of penciled in and crossed out things. So I imagine that's how it came out. I wasn't directly involved. I was the editor. When they were all done, then it was my job to take what they gave me, make it intelligible, understandable, spelled correctly. That was it. I didn't have much to do with the actual development of this one because I didn't participate in the sessions. Okay, next thing. I think it's fair to use weather and survival if the players are warned ahead of time. Okay, sure. My question, what's the reason that, well, oh, this question, an inadvertent typo spawned an interesting, a gentle comment following it. What is the reason that wandering monsters became part of the game? And that spawned wandering monsters, a beautiful malapropism. Thank you. I know I'm being facetious here, but right now, with the cancel culture, wokeness is causing wandering monsters as a consequence of postmodern demand for complex fictional characters. Okay, wandering monsters. I asked Gary about that very early on. In fact, I think he might have explained it to me before I actually played it the first time. He said he had two things to do when the players got to argue or lost their way and they were, I don't know, what do you think, he had two things he could do. If he wasn't particularly angry with them, he'd have a wandering monster show up. And that would immediately focus their attention. Didn't have to be anything really bad. He would have wandering monsters because his dungeons he reused. His dungeon was an organic thing. And while for several months, a given area might have been the orc level, once the orcs were all cleared out, then maybe it was the hobgoblins that moved in. His dungeons were very organic. So people wandering around knowing that they're in one that's pretty well cleaned out and everything, being all smug in that, turn the corner and there's an ogre or whatever. It was to keep players on their toes, to make them maintain stealth discipline, etc., to screw with them a little bit, and to get them moving when they were standing at the intersection arguing about where they were going to go next. The other thing he had when he was angry with them is something he called the blue bolt. And it would just come out of the heavens and zap one of the players, usually the one that was arguing. I used the blue bolt myself. Pardon me again, I gotta stay lubricated. I got a little bit of a cough going, but it's a productive cough. Okay, here we go. What spell is a must-have for low-level magic users? And the very first response would have been mine also, and that's sleep. It's the first one you should get. And I'll tell you why. Now, another person suggested read magic. Useful, I'll grant you. Another one used magic missiles, but they're talking about multiple missiles per shot, which means they're either playing OD&D or one of the later editions screwed them up and put them back that way. Because when I saw to it that they got changed for first edition, the previous thing was like a mortar barrage. It either hit or it missed. And if it missed, that was your last thing. Oh, great, my one spell, and I missed. So I can't speak to that one. But sleep I agree with for the fact that it'll affect 10 hit die worth of creatures. Now, I have always been loosey-goosey on that. Not 10 ones, 10 worth. So if you're up against 3 3s, 3 third levels, that's it. You got them. They're asleep. provided they, fill their throat. Sleep is probably the most useful for a low level, because when all hell's breaking loose and it's bearing down on you, you can try to sleep it. If you're successful in sleep it, you can take your staff and beat its brains in, if you're so inclined. There are, sleep doesn't work on everything, doesn't work on undead, doesn't work on elves, whatever. But by and large, for a low level, I think it's a great idea. Okay, now we'll end on this weird note that here we go back discussing the plumbing and sanitation habits of giant winged lizards. That the dragon fear that comes upon you, that aura that they project, is based on the stench. Well, interesting idea. Myself, I would have you make a saving throw versus dry heaving, and the dry heave would be 1 to 3 hit points, because you're all bent over and your abdomen's sore and now you're a little stiff. The fear, I don't know. I think fear is more like a psionic type thing. And then somebody commented on that. Stench is like in my PC's pantaloons. Yeah, well, that may well happen too. Let's face it, dragons ought to be awesome. They ought to be enormous. They ought to be, they ought to make your pants stink. That's why in the early literature, those few individuals that managed to actually slay a dragon were, super normal, superhuman, looked up to as heroes. Okay, don't forget, October 24th, November 14th. I don't know what I do know that there's no cost to play my game. I don't know what you might have to shell out to get a badge. But if there's a badge, do it. Because I know in the case of North Texas, they are used to working on the money that they made on the last one to put on the next one. Well, as we know, the last one didn't come out right. So don't begrudge the money, because the established ones are companies and cons that are trying to stay alive. Support any con that's going virtually. Support them. Pay the $5 or $8 or whatever it is. Autumn Revel with Garricon. I'm not involved in that one because I was getting surgery and stuff during the end of the sign up and event providing thing, so I missed it. But like I said, I'm in these 2 others. I'll be in others after that. Support the cons that are trying to go virtual to stay alive. And hey, it beats the hell out of sitting at home and doing nothing. Even if it's just looking at our ugly mugs, 8 of them spread around, the screen. It's still a lot of fun. You can still get the facial reactions if you read people's faces like most of us do. That's there. In the meantime, stay healthy. Do the right things. And Dodata Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when the rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.